Hello everyone, my name's Sabouts. I'm here with the first ever 4X podcast for the 4X subreddit, joined by several other 4X gamers. There's actually a total of 7 of us here. And for our first ever topic, we're going to go ahead and jump into the general state of 4X gaming in the last couple years. I'll kind of start it out here. I'm going to roll it out with a controversial topic, that being that I actually enjoyed Stellaris, which I know a lot of people didn't. Anybody got anything to add to that?
No, I have to agree. I'm Devil Dog or Orcas of Dolphins on subreddit Rob, and yeah, I'll have to agree. I enjoyed Stellaris a lot, and it's funny because I enjoyed vanilla Stellaris. And there are so many people that I see that are like hardcore 4X gamers that just despise it, and I don't get it. It's definitely not perfect, but it's been a lot of fun. I think it's a really good mash of 4X and like the grand strategy elements that worked well for Europa and like Vicky and all that stuff. So to me, it was a very good mashup of some of the best that both grand strategy and 4X had to offer. So what exactly did you like the most about it, Sabouts?
The big thing was I know that it was lacking a lot in depth and complexity. I think that a lot of the more hardcore strategy 4X gamers, that's the big thing that was for them. Also, it was lacking a lot in the mid game. But for me, a lot of the things that I did enjoy was the multiplayer seems a lot more convenient than most 4X games. It was just very simple to join into actual servers and play with people, and to be able to actually jump into hot games that are currently going on, which was, I think, a big feature, because a 4X game is generally a big commitment when you sit down and want to play multiplayer with somebody. So the ability to be able to hot join into one was sort of a nice feature. On top of that, it just felt, the galaxy and everything felt very, it was very nicely put together, for lack of a better way to put it. It's just everything was very strung out. I think the most recent DLC that they released, the Leviathans DLC, really fleshed out the game. And then the last biggest thing for me is the fact that it's Paradox, and I super support Paradox in pretty much anything they do, because I know that even though the base game was a little emptier than I would have liked it to be, I know they're going to flesh it out with a massive amount of content over the next couple of years, kind of like they did with Europa and Crusader Kings 2.
Yeah, it has a lot of potential. I'm Strategia SE on Reddit, Strat, whichever you prefer, and like it's got problems around the mid game, but I really I really like how alive it all feels, much more than many other grand strategy games and 4X games, with the bops. Really, your population is not just a number. You actually have these pops with their own ethics and everything. It feels great, and all the different anomalies you can find. From the mission statement for Stellaris, I think was something like, the galaxy is ancient and full of wonders, and I think they really did succeed in that, and they're sort of nailing the space opera 4X. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they're going to build on that further as the expansions progress.
Yeah, I also like the pops. Kirkus23 from Reddit. Insofar as it lets the pops tell the story, and the story has an effect on the pops. The narrative of the game has a lot more depth to it than you find in a lot of other places, and the writing is pretty decent as well.
Yeah, sorry. I think that it was mentioned, with some of the content that's coming, it'll flesh. I think there's a lot of people that are kind of on the fence right now that are going to see Stellaris for what I think it is. But yeah, with 1.5 banks, and I think they've called it Utopia, the expansion that's coming out. I really feel like those that were like intrigued by Stellaris and saw the potential, some of that potential is going to be realized. And as Sabouts was saying, some of that mid-game stuff has been like tightened up a little bit with Leviathans, but it's still missing something. And I think superstructures and a lot of that like policy stuff that they're going to be adding, that's the kind of stuff that I was expecting from Stellaris to begin with. But I think it's going to be the additions that people needed to really get behind it.
Well, that's kind of the question. This is Combat Wombat. what's the cost going to be on the game to get to where it finally needs to be, to get to that level. I mean, Crusader Kings 2, I think that was pretty good right off the bat. The DLC, definitely took it out of the park. How long is it going to take Stellaris to get to that good enough level, though?
But you have to hand it to them, though, because, like, Stellaris, a brand new IP, they had these other games where no one even knew Paradox when they originally released Europa Universalis, like number 1. And in Victoria 1, like these games that sort of like went under a lot of people's radar. Here they are, they're releasing this like brand new IP, and they don't really know outside history very well. So I for a vanilla base game, like I get that it's probably not where it should be because we expect these like huge games from Paradox at this point. But considering that it's not history and it's not like what they're used to, I think Stellaris really did a pretty good job of introducing people to grand strategy.
Also, being a grand strategy and it being Paradox, you're dealing with the Clausewitz engine, which does allow that multiplayer that was previously mentioned to function pretty easily as a kind of a drop-in kind of situation. The other thing is that the modability is incredible compared to a lot of other engines that haven't been around as long in terms of what just random people can bring to the game in addition to what Paradox brings to the game themselves.
This is Tortuga or Tortuga Power. So we're already talking a lot about Stellaris, so maybe this has been what really formed the landscape for the last 2 or 3 years. But what other games have we played besides Stellaris that have really struck us?
For me, it's been Endless Legend. There was like a brief love period with me with Endless Space, only because I saw this. Before Endless Space, there weren't many 4X games, and it felt like Endless Space kind of ushered in this huge like plethora of new 4X games. But when Endless Space came out, I was like, all right, I can see the developers' potential here. Like they have beautiful artwork, and some of the stuff they were doing and trying was, it was pretty cool. But then Endless Legend came, and I feel like it fulfilled a lot of the potential. I think this is also a game that people are going to come back and be like, oh, I hated, because there are some choices that rile some people, especially regarding combat. But Endless Legend, I've always liked story and asymmetry and stuff like that, and Endless Legend nailed both of those out of the park. And for me, being able to play a game 8 different ways, and even more than that sometimes, I mean, you can play a game with the cultists or some of these very unique races that they have in Endless Legend, and you could play the same faction twice and it's still a very different game. But you play another, like a different faction each time you play the game, and your focuses are different, your strategies are different, and the storyline is different. Endless Legend is easily one of my favorite games of all time. Argue against me.
I won't argue against you. I will say that the Endless series definitely does a great job of having factions that feel very different, and different civilizations having meaningful impacts on your strategies beyond what numerical modifiers on your species sheet is going to offer you in a lot of other games.
Well, if you like Endless Legend, take a look at Civilization 4 with the Fall from Heaven 2 mod, because it's not the same. Of course, it's built on Civ 4. There's only so much you can do with that, but it has some of the same ideas. Like the whole faction asymmetry is very strongly present there as well. The story-driven nature. It's a lot like, I mean, Endless Legend isn't. They're not ripping off Fall from Heaven 2 in any way, but I'd be very surprised if they didn't, at least play it once or twice and drew some inspiration from it. So it's really sort of recognizable elements that return in both in Fall from Heaven 2 and in Endless Legend.
All right, so who's the one that doesn't like it? There's got to be one of us. I mean, there's 7 people here. One of us does not like Endless Legend.
I want to like Endless Legend, but like with Endless Space, it doesn't really want to click, and I'm not sure why. It's great, like I said, it's really absolutely gorgeous design, the story-driven nature. It's fantastic, but for some reason I'm playing it and it just doesn't really want to connect, to sink in. Like it's sort of, there's a disconnect going on somewhere. So I don't like it as much as I want to like it.
I think if this is 20 or Gulu25 on the 4X subreddit there. I think if there's one piece that's definitely the shortcoming of most of the Amplitude games, or at least the Endless series of games, it's just the way that they haven't quite been able to figure out, whether it's an outer space or a fantasy setting, how to sort of do the combat. They've always sort of had kind of a mixed bag approach of some tactics with the card system for space, or more of a hex grid tactical turn-based approach for Legend. In either case, I think for me that was really the kind of a barrier to entry for really turning a good game into a great game, or something that really keeps you coming back, because it always felt like that anytime you had to do combat with anybody else, it just felt lacking. It felt, I wanted to auto resolve it, but oftentimes I was worried about how well that was going to turn out, so I had to kind of stick it through myself, and it just wasn't always something enjoyable. I thought that was one of the weaknesses of not only just the Legend or Space, but really as a shop. I don't know if they've quite figured out that sweet spot to fit in with the rest of their games. And like you guys described, they're beautiful games. They're really well thought out. There's a ton of detail put into the faction design and the way research works and all these other little game systems. But at the end of the day, one of the hallmarks of 4X, which is that combat system, really just feels like it's lacking to me anyways.
Yes. See, I've never been a big combat guy. Like I generally like war, but I don't like combat. So, I mean, growing up on Civilization, war was always just two units like bashing into each other and really not seeing anything of it. Just, my imagination sort of had to paint the picture for me. So Endless Legends combat, in stark contrast to Endless Space, I think Endless Legend actually did enough for me that I felt connected to it, because I was able to give general strategies and sort of see that kind of play out in a way that, for the most part, seemed like what I expected of each combat to go like. And for me, Endless Legend hit that sweet spot between speed of the resolution and tactics. So there was enough tactics that I felt like I was adding to whatever was going on, but I also didn't feel bogged down by how long it took, like maybe Age of Wonders 3 does.
Well, just as long as you turn on the unit animation speed up quite a bit, right? For Endless Legend.
Yeah, the base animation speed makes me like I'm tearing my hair out. I'm like, oh my god, move. But I think it's 2-speed. 2-speed for me is perfect. Like, it's fast enough that I'm not bogged down and I don't feel bored out of my mind, but it's slow enough that I'm not like, what's going on? So,
yeah, I'd agree.
All right, so who else has a game that they've really liked the last couple of years?
I think we should talk about Star Ruler 2. I think that was semi-popular, at least.
Yeah, there's a small little fan base that's like super eager on the 4X subreddit. So yeah, if someone's got something about Star Ruler 2, I'm sure we will appease some people.
It's funny because I have Star Ruler 2 and Star Ruler 1, and I've never played them ever. And I've been meaning to for the longest time because I've heard nothing but good things about the game. And when I found out that the developers are pretty much kind of stopped developing, they've gone in their separate ways for the most part, I was really bummed out because I've heard nothing but good things about the game. And I guess at the end of the day, it really was just maybe the marketing that kind of, for whatever reason, the game just didn't capture a large appeal like it did with everybody else. But has anybody here played it and actually knows how it is?
Star Ruler 2 is great. I mean, it's well thought out. It's all fleshed out. There's really no major problems. But I'm just not a big fan of real-time strategy. I mean, it makes it hard for multiplayer. You got to get a bunch of people together, and they've got to all play at the same time, where you've got a turn-based, you can play by email or whatever. So it doesn't I don't feel like it's got the staying power because you're not even going to be able to get those really long-term multiplayer games going with it.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely much prefer turn-based whenever it's possible. But just in terms of the mechanics themselves, even when it is possible real time, which is really just can get a bit overwhelming sometimes, and definitely annoys the micromanager in me that I can't. It's literally impossible to do everything at the same time perfectly. I do have that problem with it as well, but in terms of the interesting mechanics it brings to bear, I feel like it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, something that I can actually, this is my small claim to fame. I got to play multiplayer with the devs like really, really early in their early access, and it was a lot of fun. And it was one of the few games that I've played, 4X games that I've played multiplayer. But I think we were like 2 hours in, and we weren't even remotely close to getting to a point where we could stop. And having to come, like, wanting to go back to that, but realizing that we'd all have to be on at the same time and all that stuff, that definitely is a detriment to Star Ruler 2. But there's a lot going for Star Ruler 2 that I don't know if someone just spit out about the diplomatic system, because I think that's something that we really need to talk about.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the diplomatic system insofar as the how influence is used as a resource, not just as an additional chip at a bargaining table where you just have that standard screen with your assets on the left, their assets on the right. You just negotiate something and press trade deal. It's okay if you're dealing with other humans and you have that kind of conniving thing going on, but against AI, it seems very mechanical and almost pointless. With the Star Ruler 2, you end up having much more interesting interactions insofar as how you gather cards and play cards and try to push resolutions that can really change the state of the game. You can annex planets, you can annex systems, you can create wonders just through diplomatic action and expending influence as a resource.
Yeah, it's super unique, and I think it worked to its detriment too, because it was so unique that it was difficult to get a hold of. I was telling you, I think earlier, that it took me like 20 hours to get a hold of like some of the most basic mechanics of Star Ruler 2. And we were talking about the pressure like mechanic of that game, and I still to this day don't understand it completely. So, I think that has a lot to do with why Star Ruler 2 and the Blind Mind Studios in general like went out, because they built these really cool games, but they were so different than everything else that a lot of people had a hard time getting behind them, and a lot of people had a hard time like, just if you have a very short, brief period to deal with it and figure out how to play Star Ruler 2, you're not going to have a good time. But if you can, dedicate 20 hours to it, you'll start to figure it out, and then you'll be like, wow, this thing is brilliant. And the diplomatic system is brilliant. This card system is really cool. It's very gamey, but it's very cool. And this daisy chaining stuff is weird, but it gets really cool once you start building superstructures and stuff like that. Star Ruler 2 is probably one of the most underrated games that I've played in a long time, and it's just a shame that it caused them to go out.
Well, another one of those games that takes like a pretty long time to get into. I think that I don't know if we can really call it a recent game, because I think the original was released in 2010 or something, Distant Worlds. But if we treat Distant Worlds Universe, which was I think 2014, that's been my favorite for the last few years.
Distant Worlds combat was kind of rock paper scissorsy. That was always my big hang up with it.
Yeah, I guess, but there's so many different rock, papers, and scissors, right? Yeah.
So I can't believe I'm about to say this, but what Distant Worlds actually really needs is the combat system from Master of Orion 3, where you can arrange fleets and task forces into dedicated tasks. So fleet engagements are a lot more than just death balls smashing together. We could have more strategic positioning of your missile batteries and your, up close knife fight ships, and have them operate in some kind of combat in a way that doesn't look like just a mess of ships flying all over the place.
That's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Spouts.
I was gonna say you can kind of somewhat tweak that in Distant Worlds by setting the actual settings for the ship, the hulls. You can set some of them to sit back, some of them to close in and engage. But I do agree that the combat system could be a little bit maybe reworked. I think the biggest thing that puts Distant Worlds universe at the top of my list for 4X games is the universe feels very alive compared to any other 4X game I've ever played that takes place in space. You've got trade ships flying around everywhere. Even all the way through into the late game, you're still exploring star systems and you're still finding artifacts and random abandoned ships throughout systems all the way up until the last until the game's pretty much over. So the universe feels very alive in that respect. A big overhaul that I'd like to see for Distant Worlds 2 is the diplomacy system, because the diplomacy system is absolutely garbage in Distant Worlds. But other than that, there's a lot of things that I think they really did succeed in accomplishing that a lot of games don't.
As dicey as that diplomacy system was, I think the thing that really, really desperately needs to be overhauled is the UI in that game. I'm a bit of a stickler for UI design because it's tangentially related to what I do for a living. And the UI in Distant Worlds just kind of makes me want to cry on some level.
I don't think the UI is, I mean, it's not great, but it's an old game anyway. And when we think about 4X games, I mean, what Aurora 4X is like an amazing game, and
and I would actually totally agree. Aurora 4X, I would actually give more respect to the UI design for that game, just insofar as first it's free, so beggars can't be choosers in that sense, but also in terms of just simple tasks like merging fleets or assigning one order to two fleets is inordinately difficult in a game that really, for a real-time pausable game like that, it's just really hard to find excuses for that.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of want to loop back to what we were talking about with combat, because I thought that one of the interesting ways of looking at Distant Worlds combat is it's such a cluster foxtrot, because when you warp anywhere, your units don't arrive exactly at the spot. There's like a dispersion. And I always thought that was just actually, I pretended that it was part of the game design, that you get into these real furballs, because unless you go in, don't jump in right on top of the enemy, you can kind of like organize your fleet behind the lines. But if you just warp in right onto a station or something, that the furball that results is actually a result of your lack of planning, and that the inaccuracy of warping in.
And I can see that. The problem being is that the micromanagement required to not have it be a furball is exacerbated by the really dicey UI.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I would concede that point. Yeah, to speak more about Sabouts' point, though, coming back, we're going to talk about circling around. The whole civilian side of Distant Worlds really gets me. I think that really helps the game feel alive. And it's a big surprise to me that Stellaris hasn't incorporated that civilian side, because if you had civilian ships just floating around doing their thing inside your empire within Stellaris, I really think that would add to it, that in ways that just they haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, I'll happily say that the civilian sector is the most interesting thing about Distant Worlds for me. Having that there is really interesting. There's very few other games that even acknowledge the fact that your government isn't some kind of all-encompassing hive mind. And letting other aspects of your empire do their own thing is also just kind of interesting to watch in an ant farm kind of way.
Well, for Stellaris, there is a civilian trade mod, which adds like civilian trade ships going between planets and systems. I haven't tried it out myself. Every time I wanted to, there were some issues with not being updated to the latest version, but it's there.
Yeah, I would also like to see ships going to and from mining stations and stuff like that, just very similar to Distant Worlds, because I know that at some level that would be a system hog, because I know, Stellaris is much more advanced than Distant Worlds, but it's in like graphics capabilities and stuff like that. So, but it would be cool to see ships, like going back and forth from mining stations, bringing back resources and stuff like that. I know that they have some plans for adding trade, but I'm hoping that they add some of that that civilian side stuff from Distant Worlds.
So what we really want is the Wiki 2 economic engine, right?
Yes.
It's really interesting. My roommate's an economist, and apparently while designing the Wiki 2 economy, they actually went to universities to ask about the economics behind certain things. And they said, well, how do we calculate this value? And the answer from the economist was, if you figure out how to do that, you win a Nobel Prize.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I think that with Distant Worlds, you know, the big thing too is with the whole private sector is the actual economy in Distant Worlds. The fact that, you know, you're collecting resources from these different planets and then you're bringing them into storage areas. You're using them to build ships. You're trading them, but there's an actual economy going on in the background, and you don't actually have to fully, other than building mining stations and harvesting the resources, you don't have to fully track the resources moving between planets or anything. If you queue up ships, your private sector will pick up moving the orders around so that the proper resources and supplies can get to the proper stations to build the ships. And the fact that all of that's just going behind the scenes is something I'd love to see Stellaris do something like that. I know they've briefly mentioned trying to do some type of private economy on the side. I'm sure they're taking some inspiration from Distant Worlds, but like I said earlier, out of every 4X game I've ever played, this is the only one I've ever seen that's really put a heavy emphasis on just things happening in the background that make the entire universe feel a lot more fuller and alive.
Interestingly, other things come in from other genres there. You have the Anno series where your civilian populace have different classes and consume different things depending on the proportions. And if you could have some kind of interplay between, you know, your cyborgs requiring certain luxury resources to exist and them giving advantages in certain situations, that would be kind of interesting to see in more detail.
I was just going to say earlier, I think you guys are onto a definite point there with Distant Worlds and how there's that, you know, that private sector happening, sort of that simulation layer almost to some degree behind the scenes that really is important, I think, to these types of games, especially the real-time games, and certainly something that I felt was missing from Stellaris, you know, knowing that Paradox had a lot of experience with some of the other titles like we're mentioning here. I was hoping they would be able to basically, you know, bring along sort of the best parts of some of the things we've mentioned with Star Ruler and Distant Worlds, and put more polish around it and really flesh it out in a way that felt more modern and positive. And I think, you know, what Distant Worlds offers at a really base value, if anybody who is out there that hasn't played it, I mean, just like these guys are saying, when you first load up the game and you build your first space station, it's just amazing to see ships come and go. And there's a difference between having a small space station with only 8 ship bays versus a very large one that has 24, and you can actually see how busy a part of your civilization is, or a part of your empire is. And as things grow over time, it all sort of becomes more complicated and more interesting. And like was mentioned a minute ago, I think by Sabouts, you don't necessarily have to care about all that stuff, but it's there if you do. And it's always something that kind of gives you, puts kind of things in perspective as your empire grows. And, as you build bigger ships and all that, it's definitely, there's a sense of progression there based on that simulation layer that I think is really important to these types of games.
All right, so here's an opportunity to start getting controversial. Someone's just mentioned a game that perhaps was pretty popular, but you hated. Because I know somebody hates Distant Worlds in this group. I'm not naming names if they don't want to say anything.
But that's me. I can't stand it.
And kind of me.
Oh my God, get out of this chat. Get out. Oh.
The UI just infuriates me on so many levels. I understand why people like it. I have no problem with people who do like it. It's totally fine. But as somewhat of a UI design geek, it hurts me. I feel by the looks of the game itself that they may have coded themselves into a corner. So these might not be things we need to worry about in Distant Worlds 2, but I really hope it's something they get over.
would be interesting to see what was your objections with it, strategy.
Well, it's in theory, I should like it a lot. Like, it has all those different elements, but it's, you know, I started the game, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at stuff happening, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. I have no idea what it can do in many cases. There's, you know, I feel just because it's so deep and complicated, it's very difficult to get a feel for interactivity, for what's going on, how I can change stuff. Things are not, you know, it doesn't, the UI also doesn't help. It's sort of, yeah, I just can't figure out what I'm doing, and I'm just looking at this at my empire doing its thing, and stuff's going on, and there are planets being scanned, and my scout ships are exploring, and I don't know what else. I'm just sitting there staring at the screen for minutes on end, and everything just runs without any input.
Speaking to that point, I'd say that usually the response is you can go watch some YouTube videos about it. And Das Tactic has a series on it, but the series on how to play Distant Worlds is 13 hours long, which is a bit problematic for somebody just trying to play a game.
Yeah, requiring a 13-hour like YouTube Let's Play introduction to any game is ridiculous. I don't have 13 hours. I have 13 hours to play a game, but to watch somebody else play a game, Das Tactic's stuff, like when he used to go by whatever's Das 34280 or whatever it is. That's he had like his videos for like I guess a brief introduction to Distant Worlds was probably the best, just for like the first couple episodes. He actually did a really good job of being like, here's how to go, and if you really want to, just go from it, just go for it from here. And that's the whole reason I even got into Distant Worlds, because I finally watched his videos and I was like, you know what, this guy makes it look pretty easy. And I'm glad I watched it, because it ended up being like hundreds of hours for me in Distant Worlds. A game that I had particularly disliked as of late is Civilization 6. And I think that's going to be kind of controversial too, because it's Civilization. There's some diehard fans of Civilization. But, for me, having played Endless Legend, having played these games of late that have tried to change the formula and have done it pretty successfully, I'm really kind of tired of the Civilization formula. Does anybody else feel the same way?
There's nothing left of the Civilization formula at all in Civ 6. That's its problem. They've gone completely off the rails. It's not a Civ game anymore. They should just call it something else.
Yeah, I think that sometimes that is people want to innovate and make sure that their game isn't like the previous iteration, but sometimes the previous iteration was successful because it was really done right. I don't know how they get around like marketing the next title if it's the same thing, but I was really happy with Civ 5 at least, so I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, they just need to give us another Alpha Centauri is what we need, and not Beyond Earth.
Well, Beyond Earth did have some of its own potential that sadly wasn't realized. But with Civ, there's still a lot of people holding up Civ 4 as the best Civ game, and sure, you could argue for that. Civ 4 is great. I played it a lot. I love it. Civ 5 is also great. I like it a lot, but there are still some things that irk me. And Civ 6 fixed a lot of the things, a lot of the problems I had with Civ 5, and at the core, at the heart of it, it is still Civ. All the same recognizable elements are still there, and that they have innovated a lot. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that's arguable. Most of the stuff I do like, but I can understand why you wouldn't like it. But I think Civ 6 is definitely a Civ game, and I personally like a lot of the new unique stuff, the things with the districts and the way the units work now. It's I like it. it's not. It hasn't reached its full potential yet. Then again, Civ 5 at release was much emptier than it is right now. So when the inevitable expansions come for Civ 6, I think that it will eventually be better than Civ 5.
Yeah, my frustration with their districts mechanic was that Endless Legend had just done it, and while Civilization 6 certainly did it better, again, if I'm looking for innovation, Endless Legend did that. So why not figure out something that works for you? I mean, I have personal issues with Firaxis, but beyond that, like, it's just that Civilization formula of going through time and going through like unit types as time progresses and going from cavemen to atomic age, all that stuff. That whole formula for me. And I know it's been 20 years plus, so I certainly don't hold it against it, like this franchise, but I just, at this point, I'm done with it. I put 6 hours into Civilization 6, and I'm going to leave it there because it's poetic.
What did you guys think of the Eureka system in Civ 6? I'm curious about that because I'm kind of on the fence with both sides of the coin here with you guys. There's things about it that I like. There's things about it that were kind of disappointing. But I thought that the Eureka system was a neat little touch on the research mechanics there, and it really, brought about some more context and a little more playability in the game versus practically all these other games we've mentioned where you've got some sort of tech web or tech tree, and you're basically just picking and choosing. Civ 6 bringing into the fact that you can actually do in your game, which can help dictate or impact how you're going to progress, how your game's going to progress. Did you guys find it as too gamey? Did you find it as interesting? Did you think it was a complete joke? Like, what did you guys think of it?
I find it interesting. The Civ 6 designer was actually Ed Beach. Mostly did board games beforehand. And it kind of shows in a lot of the mechanics. There's some very different mechanics and the type of mechanics you'd expect to see on the board that you'd find.
Yeah. With the cards, with the government cards especially.
Yep, definitely. You can certainly see that inspiration almost there. I don't know. I just think it's something that I wish, again, not to go back to Stellaris right away, but that's something that for a new IP for Paradox in outer space, it just seemed like a lot of the research choices there were just so cut and dry sci-fi tropes that had been done before in other games, and 5% to laser weapons, mining facility 2, and all this kind of generic stuff where you progress through it. It's certainly there and it's functional, but it doesn't really. It's just more stuff I have to click through basically as I'm progressing through the game. Where with Civ 6, at least the concept of these Eurekas, it seems like there's some context around it. And I almost wonder if down the road we could see a 4X game where you're not making tech choices or research choices in a tree, but you're actually just playing the game, and based on what you're doing, that's how your civilization or your empire or your whatever might actually progress. I think that's something that I'd like to see as we go forward into 2017 and beyond. It's just people kind of reinventing how some of these things are done. Obviously, they've been done in a very similar way by a lot of different developers over the years, and it's just, along with the rest of certain pieces of Civ, it's just way too familiar for me. I want something new and different.
Stellaris does that in a very abstract roundabout way insofar as certain choices that you make during the course of your narrative affect the tech card draw. It still has largely, plus 5% to laser weapons we don't really care about. But every once in a while, it does have something a little more interesting in that, insofar as the rare and legendary or whatever they call the rarer tech picks.
That's one of the things. One of the reasons why I like mods so much. I play with a lot of mods usually, and with Stellaris, I have 2 mods in particular. One is called More Technologies, and the other one I can't remember. And they just like it says, it adds a lot more technologies and a lot more stuff. And some of it is sort of the same kind of extra % bonus to this or that. But there's a hell of a lot more flavor as well. There's more like diplomatic style technologies, and there's a lot more special purpose buildings. There's a lot more wonder type buildings, more legendary techs. There's more options for what you can put on your space stations. There's a lot, just a lot of additional flavor that I can get in the tech tree from these mods.
I don't really think it's fair to compare games when we're talking about mods that are added. I think it's fair to judge a game by its modability, but not by which particular person made which particular mod for a game. Yeah.
True, but yeah.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of games can be modded, and a lot of, basically the users can pick up where the developers left off. But I don't like mods myself. I don't know why or what inspired me to be that way. But anyway, I just don't like thinking about games in terms of mods. Just modability, because that's important, I know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have liked Distant Worlds if I didn't have mods for it. Because there are UI mods for Distant Worlds that I just have made the game bearable for me, and I wouldn't have put in half the amount of hours that I did if it weren't for those UI mods. And in Civilization 5, I had actually grown pretty tired of the formula by then, but there was a really awesome Civ Extended mod for Civilization 5 that really it was a UI and gameplay mod that made the game way better. So let's quickly just go over a couple more games that we've had in the last couple years that we just really like. We're not going to dive too deep into them because I think we want to wrap up soon. But I've seen some people mentioning Stars and Shadow. Does anybody want to talk about Stars and Shadow real quick?
Yes, brilliant throwback to old school 4X games. I mean, it doesn't try to do too much. And everything it does, it just nails. It's simple and fast, but it hits all the right points.
Ooh, I'm gonna plug the subreddit real quick because you actually got it through the drawing the other day, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it was really happy to see your name pop up when I put all those names through the little random name picker. I was like, I know that name. So I'm even more excited that you enjoyed it because. One of the things that I try to do while we give away games to the subreddit is just have whoever wins it sort of provide a little bit of feedback. It doesn't have to be positive or negative or anything. It just just kind of generate discussion. So I was really excited to see both of you guys liked it because I like it and I think it deserves to sell better.
I mean, even if I hadn't gotten it through the drawing, $25, brand new. I mean, perfect price for the size of game that it is. You just can't go wrong.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. The tactical combat straight from Master of Orion 2, and that Master of Orion 2 really nailed it. And I think they captured it well. They had their own little flair with hard points in terms of the ship design, kind of like the Star style kind of thing. And I think they did it really well. The rest of the economy makes it a little interesting. The hard limit on metals makes your ship choices a little more meaningful. It's definitely combat centered, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that because the game knows what it is and it does it well.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see that they've continued supporting it too. So there was just a patch 2 days ago that added super dreadnoughts or some giant hull type, and then they've publicly said that they're working on a tech tree, which is really important to me. But it's just good to see that they're continuing to support it. So. Anybody else have any games in the last couple of years that sort of flew under the radar that they liked? Silence.
I mean, I don't know. I was going to think about or talk about a game that I didn't like. I don't know if we can do that. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Galactic Civilization 3. Because I really liked Galactic Civilization 2. I played that for a long time. I mean, especially the final gold product that was, probably 3 or 4 years in the making. But I thought Galactic Civilization 3 lacked a lot of the content. I guess this is the general opinion. I'm just parroting what people are saying because I agree, but the Galactic Civilization 3 was a little bit empty.
Well, it wasn't that it was just empty. It's that it was basically the same game, which is fine, but it was empty. They didn't do anything new to make up for that or, new mechanics or anything. It was just Gal Civ 2 looking a little better and then missing half the stuff.
Yeah, I think that was I don't mean to sound like super negative, but I really hated Galactic Civilizations 3. It felt like such a stumble on Stardock's behalf. Like I just couldn't imagine that they'd go from Galactic Civilizations 2, which is easily in my like top 5 games of all time, and then spit out that crap. And I don't know, it felt like a huge misstep. And I'll echo sentiments that it just felt like it was pretty empty, that a lot of things that made Galactic Civilizations 2 really good were completely gone from Galactic Civilizations 3. And then the whole time they're touting this like 64-bit engine that no one gave a shit about.
I have a question. Is there any other like land-based games? We can kind of sometimes break down 4X to space and land, but we've only really talked about Civilization and Endless Legend. Is there any, I don't know, does anyone want to talk about Fallen Enchantress, whatever, or any of the other games? Or are those all just bombed or erased from our memory?
I feel like we could just keep talking. Honestly, there's so much to talk about that we might just need to extend this topic to a second episode.
Another time, yeah.
Yeah, because there's just so much more that there's more to talk about as far as what we liked, and then there's a lot to talk about the things that I think we disliked and felt like were missteps too. So maybe this is a good place to end this episode, and then we can come back in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a good place to cut it. This is definitely something that we can talk about in the future, carry this topic off into another episode, because I'm sure we could definitely go on with. There's been a lot going on in the last couple of years, especially within the last 2 years for 4X gaming. So we're looking to do this probably bi-weekly or at least twice a month. It's going to be posted up on the 4X subreddit. And that's where you can check it out. If anybody has any questions, they have any suggestions for the podcast here, if they have any topics they'd like to hear, definitely let us know, because we're going to be looking around for different topics to talk about, and we're totally open to suggestions. So I want to thank everybody for listening. If you've made it this far, thank you for stopping by, and we're looking forward to seeing the next podcast.